Hello everyone, hope all of you are doing well. In today's session, we are going to discuss a very important phenomenon that changed the discourse of the world literature, art, culture, science, philosophy, and many more different aspects of the society. And that particular phenomenon is the Renaissance. Now, this particular topic is very important from the upcoming examination point of view, that is your MEG 1 British poetry. So, today's session, we are trying to cover it from the literature point of view, okay, because renaissance in itself is a very wide and big topic. So our concern is that we should cover this topic from the English literature point of view, because that's what we're going to appear. But of course we'll be touching different areas as well to some extent. So without wasting any further time, let's get started. Now let us first understand that what do you mean by Renaissance, or what is the Renaissance? Now the term Renaissance literally means rebirth. It was a time of rediscovery of art, science and the philosophies of the classical era. This period encouraged creativity, exploration and intellectual exchange. Now it is very important to understand that why this Renaissance has changed the, or why it was able to change the discourse of the world literature, or you can say art, culture, just name it. Okay, it was the period of cultural, artistic, political and economic rebirth following the Middle Ages. Now, yes, of course, we'll talk about the Middle Ages, but in one of my particular video, which I have shared in my playlist, you will find discussing in details what are the specific features of the Middle Ages. Now, Renaissance actually happened after the Middle Ages and it helped to change the common notion. Now, the medieval era, often known as the medieval ages or the dark ages, began around 476 AD following the great loss of power throughout the Europe by the Roman Emperor. The Middle Ages span roughly 1000 years, ending between 1400 and 1450. Now it's important to understand Middle Ages, of course, if you want to understand Renaissance in details. What was the significance of Middle Ages? Because this period was called as Dark Age and it had some of the negative influence, and Renaissance was able to change the entire discourse. Now it was called Middle Ages because it took place between the fall of Rome and the early rise of modern Europe. Alright, and it is often separated into early Middle Ages, high Middle Ages and late Middle Ages. So I believe I've already talked about it. Now let's come back to the Renaissance. Now actually Renaissance roughly spanned between 14th to 17th century and it was a very significant event. Alright, it originally actually it was the origin of Renaissance was in Italy, but eventually it spread all over the Europe. Now it has been marked by a revival of interest in the classical learning of Greece and Rome. Now in order for the much more simplification of the ideas and features of this particular topic, I have created the entire session in point wise. Of course I'll discuss it in details. Now let us talk about the historical background of this entire phenomenon, that is the Renaissance. Now there were some particular events which led to this particular, or which helped to spread the ideals and the philosophy of this particular phenomenon, that is the Renaissance. Now these events contributed to the spread of Renaissance ideals. Now among them, the printing press specially played a vital and pivotal role in disseminating that literature and ideas to the broader public. Okay, now let's one by one discuss about the various points which led or which helped to spread the ideas and the philosophy of this particular movement. Now among them, the first of all we have to discuss is that the fall of Constantinople that happened in 1453. Now during this event, what happened is that the Greek scholars fled to Europe bringing classical texts. Now, I've already discussed about the fall of Constantinople, but in short, the fall of Constantinople in 1453, which is also known as the conquest of Constantinople, marked the end of Byzantine Empire. On May 29th, 1453, the Ottoman Empire led by Sultan Mehmed II captured the city after a siege of 55 days. This event had profound consequences, including the end of Byzantine Empire. Now, what happened is that after the siege, there was the rise of Ottoman Empire. Of course, it led to the rise of Ottoman Empire. It happened that after this entire phenomenon, there was a major exodus of Greek scholars to the west, stimulating the Renaissance. All right. Now, this particular point you have to mention in the historical background of this particular phenomenon, followed by the invention of printing press. It enabled mass production of books. Now, if you ask me that what is the best way to reach out audience or to, you know, influence a greater mass by a particular thought, then obviously that will be through books. Now I'm not talking about the digital age, we're talking about the period that just started after the middle ages. Now books played a very significant role in sharing the ideals and the philosophy of this particular movement. Now this was again, there was a particular event, that is the rise of secular thought and humanism. Now if you ask me, during the middle ages what happened is the thoughts were very much controlled by a particular group of people. Okay, and after the renaissance actually encouraged the secular thought and humanism. The age of exploration expand knowledge of worldview. The age of exploration also saw a major change during this particular period. Now, as I said that our session will broadly classify or broadly cover Renaissance in perspective or in purview of English literature. So let us start doing that and let us see what was the significant role of Renaissance in England. Now, in England, the Renaissance took root slightly later than in Italy. However, it flourished through royal patronage, especially during the reign of Elizabeth I, who was herself a poet and a strong supporter of the arts. Now, if you ask me, the Europe after the fall of the Byzantine Empire, that was the quest of Constantinople, the Greek scholars brought their ideas to the Europe and it spreaded like wildfire, okay, through the books, and they got a lot of patronage, of course, in Europe. And in case of England, it started a little bit late. It began in the late 15th century, because we know that the period of Renaissance spans over 14th century to 17th century. Now in England, it started in the late 15th century, peaked during the Elizabethan era. Okay, as I've already said that in England, it received a royal patronage, especially under the reign of Elizabeth I. Okay, so Elizabethan era was the era where English Renaissance saw its immense peak. Now it was obviously influenced by the Italian Renaissance humanism, and it focused on literature, music, philosophy and visual arts. As I already mentioned, you have to mention in your answer that this particular span of time, which is the English Renaissance, it was supported by patrons such as Queen Elizabeth I. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to discuss is the characteristics of Renaissance literature. Now, as I said that in this particular session, we will be giving more emphasis on Renaissance from the literature point of view. That's why we will discuss the characteristics of Renaissance literature. Now, Renaissance literature is characterized by humanism, a renewed focus on classical learning, and a shift towards secular themes. Now, I have mentioned this word humanism several times in this particular session, and those of you don't understand yet that what does humanism means, it means a rationalistic outlook or system of thought attaching prime importance to human rather than divine or supernatural matters. See, the main problem with the medieval ages or the dark ages was that there was a sect of people or a sect of community which was taking advantage of this particular thing. Okay, they were taking the advantage of the supernatural elements and claiming that they were blessed or they are supposed to lead, or other people, the masses, are supposed to listen to them. Okay, so that was the problem there. So more emphasis was given on humanism rather than the supernatural elements or the matters in the Renaissance period. Fine. So it also emphasizes on individualism, rationalism and exploration of human emotions and experience. Now in the particular slide you can see that I have given point wise, but of course in your exam, which will be for essay type question, you have to elaborate these particular points. Okay, so emphasis on individualism and personal emotion, as I've said. Then we have revival of classical themes and mythology, rise of vernacular literature. Now this is a very important point, guys. You have to mention this particular point in your exams, that literature was started to being written in English rather than in Latin. Now we have growth of new literary forms, that is sonnets, essays and drama, and exploration of human nature, beauty and morality. Now the main thing about Renaissance literature, that it broke away from medieval religious constraints. Okay, embracing human potential and experience. Writers experimented with new styles and forms to express their ideas. Now, if your answer is aligned towards English literature when it comes to Renaissance in your exams, then this particular answer will be incomplete without mentioning the famous personalities who have contributed immensely for the English literature. The major English Renaissance writers include William Shakespeare, Christopher Marlowe, Ben Jonson, Edmund Spenser, John Donne, and John Milton, among others. Now, lucky for you that all of these authors has been incorporated in your syllabus. Okay, so you can know more and more about them. Of course, these authors are known for the significant contributions to English literature during the Renaissance period, which saw a rebirth of interest in classical antiquity and a flourishing of creative expressions. Now, if you have time and the answer is almost of like 10 to 15 marks, you can write a couple of words for each of them, or if not all, you can mention the famous figures like William Shakespeare. He was a celebrated and decorated playwright, poet, and actor. Shakespeare is widely regarded as one of the greatest writers in the English language. His works include tragedies like Hamlet, Othello, comedies like this one, Midsummer's Night's Dream, and historical plays like Richard II continue to be studied and performed even today. Now we have also Christopher Marlowe. We have his famous works like Dr. Foster's, which is included in your syllabus. Ben Jonson is there. He was known for his witty and satirical comedies such as Volpone and Every Man in His Humor. We have Edmund Spenser. Of course, nobody can skip this particular name in the answers. We have his epic poem, The Fairy Queen, and we have John Donne too in your syllabus. So he was a metaphysical poet. Okay, Donne's work explore complex themes of love, religion, morality, often employing intellectual and paradoxical language. We can also end up your answer by mentioning other notable figures like John Milton, Francis Bacon, Sir Philip Sidney, Thomas More, Sir Walter Raleigh. Now you see the point here being is that you mention most of them and you try to at least write a couple of words for each of them in order to have some more gravity for your answer. Now, if you have time, then of course you can elaborate any particular author, and what better it be other than mentioning William Shakespeare. You can take a closer look to his works who wrote comedies, tragedies, histories, and romances. Now, Shakespeare work transcend time and culture. Okay, that's the main reason that why Shakespeare's work is being still studied as of now, and it takes huge pleasure reading his work. His plays remain relevant due to their deep understanding of human nature and mastery of the English language. As I said, that humanism played a significant role in the major themes of Renaissance. So do not forget that this particular era, the writers emphasized on humanism. Okay, their main concern was the deep understanding of human nature. Now, if you come back to William Shakespeare, we know that he was a master of dramatic structure and character development, and his famous works include Hamlet, Macbeth, Romeo and Juliet, and King Lear. Of course, you are free to add some more, that's up to you, and his sonnet explores themes of time, beauty, and love. Now, if you want to understand the nature of this particular era, that is the Renaissance era, which roughly started from the late 15th century in England, then what is the best way other than reading the dramas? Okay, the Renaissance drama became a key foundation for exploring Renaissance themes. With permanent theaters of professional actors, drama reached a new artistic heights. Now, do not forget to mention that Renaissance drama, particularly the English Renaissance drama, also known as Elizabethan drama, is characterized by a shift from abstract medieval drama to more realistic and humanistic plays. Okay, so there is a vast contrast between the medieval dramas and this Renaissance period dramas. Of course, the Renaissance period dramas were more humanistically devised, okay, humanistically written, and this particular plays were more realistic in nature. This period saw a rise in popularity of plays focusing on character development, complex plots, and exploring human emotions. Now, prominent playwrights like William Shakespeare, Christopher Marlowe, and Ben Jonson were instrumental in shaping this particular era. Now, let us talk about the themes of the English Renaissance period. Now, these themes reflect the Renaissance spirit, which was curious, bold, and deeply engaged with the world and the self. The most important thing that we have to understand about the themes of the English Renaissance, that it saw a shift from the medieval themes to focus on humanism, individualism, and the rediscovery of classical ideas. Themes explored included the potential of humanity, secularism, and the exploration of the worldly pleasures. Love, both romantic and platonic, was a prominent subject, as were the ideas of beauty, virtue, and complexities of human nature. Now, for your convenience, I have mentioned it point wise so that it becomes easier for you to answer it in the exam. Of course, do elaborate these points like humanism, what it is. As I've already said, that it emphasizes on more humanistic nature rather than spiritual, or the spiritual elements that was going on in the medieval times. So it emphasizes on human potential and achievements. Then we have love and beauty, often idealized in sonnets and lyrical poetry. Political power is also being reflected in the English Renaissance literature. It was reflected in histories and tragedies. Then comes the nature and universe. It was explored in the metaphysical poetry. Here you can also mention the names of some metaphysical poets that will earn you some extra credit, of course. And this particular point, by mentioning there was a particular theme, which is the conflict between fate and free will. Now, how do you describe the legacy of Renaissance? Now, this particular point can be immensely utilized to properly conclude your answer before writing the conclusion, because this Renaissance, it paved the way for enlightenment. Okay, enlightenment is something which is responsible for the emerging of new ideas and new concepts in literature. It changed how literature was produced and consumed. Of course, you know that the use of books was rapidly increased during this particular era, which allowed the masses to reach out to this new content. Okay, it elevated the status of English as a literary language, because prior to this, Latin was considered more influential language, and it was considered to be the language of the royals, of course. But during the Renaissance period, English emerged as a new literary language. It set standards for literary excellence and innovations. Now, the Renaissance impact is enduring. Okay, it cannot be denied. Of course, it is enduring. It shaped not only literature but also the modern worldview, promoting reason, artistic expression, and critical thinking. Now, no answer in your exams can be concluded without writing a proper conclusion about it. So, how do you conclude the answer for the Renaissance? Of course, we can mention that in the conclusion, the Renaissance was more than a period. It was a transformation. Its literature continues to speak across centuries, reminding us of the timeless power of human creativity. Now, see, particularly we know that the English literature flourished with new forms, ideas, and voices. And what was more significant was that the writers and the authors who flourished during this period, they still continue to inspire us, still continue to amuse us, and still continue to inspire us. So that is the true reawakening of the human spirit in words. So this is the video, guys. I hope you had a proper understanding about the Renaissance, especially from the English literature point of view. Yes, if you have any doubts regarding this particular session, you can feel free to comment in the comment section. I'll definitely try to address it. This particular session only covered Renaissance from the lens of English literature. Okay, but if you want to understand Renaissance from a broader perspective, covering art, culture, philosophy, and much more different things from the societal aspects, then do feel free to comment that as well. I will try to bring out a different video. Of course, that will be a lengthy one. But yes, from the examination point of view of British Poetry MEG 1, this particular answer is more than sufficient to get you the desired marks. Okay, and also a small announcement that in the forthcoming days, we'll be coming up with a lot of videos from British poetry. So do feel free to connect with us by subscribing this channel. And if you do like us, so do share it with your friends and other communities, and do like this video so that we can reach a broader audience. Till we meet next time, God bless you and thank you all.